In the year 2038, invisible drones are sent to the past to pick up any event you want to see, if you have the money to pay for it. One woman using the service discovers a secret that puts her in danger in the present. This week, Jason McNamara talks about his upcoming thriller with a dash of science fiction called Past Tense, and Kumar and I review it. But first, Kumar, a manga translator, also talks about how he recently went somewhat viral online for quitting a series. And later in the show, Alex Squiers talks about his comics-inspired audio drama, The StarWell Foundation. First, if you appreciate the work we do on deconstructing comics and our other podcasts and want bonus content, we'd love it if you'd support the show at patreon.com/deconcomics for as little as $2 a month. Our monthly issue-by-issue look at 1960s Amazing Spider-Man comics is available to patrons, chipping in at least $4 a month. Check out our goals and rewards and pledge your support now at patreon.com/deconcomics. This is Tim.
And this is Kumar.
And this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo with Kumar in Melbourne. Hello.
Hello.
Oh, before we get started, you've been in the news lately.
Oh, geez. That's a whole other episode. That's really...
It just occurred to me now. I meant to do that.
I never thought I would get my 15 minutes for quitting a series, but and it wasn't even, there's so many dimensions to this story, which is bizarre, but basically I'm a manga translator, and I have this Twitter account, and I use my Twitter. I've had my Twitter account for 10, 12 years. I don't know, a very long time. And I've only really started using it in the past year to promote my other podcast, Comic Book Movie Oblivion. Mm-hmm. And when I'm on here, once a week or something, I'll retweet a post about this show or my own show, and I might get one like, and I might get one retweet, usually from Jordan, who's the co-host of the show. And but sometimes if I see some promotion or article about something that I've been translating, I'll post that as well. And so I was working on this series, Cipher Academy, and it was hard work, very hard work. And it was a weekly Shonen Jump series, so I was doing this every Saturday morning. I'd have to wake up and work on this thing, and it was all these puzzles and codes, and it was just driving me crazy.
And it's all in Japanese. It's like puns and stuff, and
yeah, not even necessarily puns, but stuff to do with there's so much stuff in there specifically about the kana syllabary, which is the 50-letter, quote unquote, letter alphabet, the Japanese alphabet. It's about that. It's. Yeah, so anyway...
Yeah, so in any other language, it loses something.
You're trying to go into codes, and I had initially said, I told my editor, look, at the start, I was like, yeah, I'll take on a new series. I'll do about 50 chapters, because I had quit a series before, and I'd never quit a series, but this is the first time I'd ever quit a series. And last year, I had another Shonen Jump series, which I picked up from chapter 77. I started. I took over for somebody else, and I did it for about 50, and I said, I'm going to try to do 77 chapters. And I told my editor around chapter 50, I said, look, I want to quit around chapter 77. And he said, well, okay, I'll find a replacement for you earlier. So I was able to quit that series. But I think I had not much emotional attachment to it because I'd come on quite late. Mm-hmm. So it was a little bit easier for me to quit for the first time. This time, I'd come on at the beginning, but it was just so much work to do in a single day. And I said, I'll do 50, but can we try to make it 30 or something? Can you start looking for somebody to replace me? And he said, I'll find somebody. And he found somebody right away. It was so great. And he was very understanding. And I said, look, I'll do it if you pay me twice as much, and we do it on a book schedule, not on a weekly schedule. I'll do it. But I think it's crazy to be doing it in the first place, but I will do it. And he said, the bosses are saying, no, we can't do that. But he said, I totally understand. And he found a replacement. And it was really great. So somebody wrote an article, unrelated, just out of the blue, because people were seeing these chapters come out. Mm-hmm. And somebody on Screen Rant wrote an article about how this manga is untranslatable. And, of course, my Google Alerts picked it up. So I posted a link to that in my Twitter. And I wrote one line, which was, sorry, peeps, chapter 13 will be my last. Now, the reason I wrote that was because in the article, it was like, wow, this translator is doing hard work on this series. And I was like, yeah, but I'm sorry to inform you that I'm quitting. That was the intention of it. But it got interpreted as this translator is quitting because of the link, because it's too hard, because the series is untranslatable. And which is what I told my editor, but not what I put in my Twitter. But that's the way they read it anyway. So, and then somehow it exploded. Like, it got spun into an article. Somehow, I don't know what the chain reaction was, but there was like 500 retweets, 1,500 likes, 80 comments. I was like, oh my God. And there were like 5 articles popped up, and only one of them actually approached me for comments. And all the others were just, I don't know how, it was really amazing how the first article that came up spun a whole article, it was on CBR, a whole article just from my one-line tweet. They had this whole page. I was like, I'm seeing how the sausage is made now. And the only ones that came to me for comment were Kotaku. They actually said, you want to say why you quit and stuff. And then they had already published the article, but I woke up in the morning and saw it, and then I saw the DM in my Twitter, and then I replied, and then he updated the article. And it kind of snowballed into this big thing. Everybody was super supportive, like, yeah. And another thing about this that's interesting is I live in a bubble, and I had no idea. Like, I was just like, yeah, I'll do the series. And I started seeing a lot of comments like, Nishio-san makes another translator quit, or no surprise from a Nishio-san series. And I didn't know the writer of this manga is notorious for producing this kind of stuff, but apparently he is. So everybody was really supportive. There were a few comments, especially not on Twitter, but on Facebook, especially on the Kotaku link to the article. A lot of people were like, hire somebody with skills, or this is what you get for hiring a NEET. Or things like that, like, but it was very, very rare. And everybody was like, yeah, totally understandable. And so it was it's been a weird week. It was all just literally, I went from 100 Twitter followers. For 10 years, I had 100 Twitter followers and went to 400, literally overnight, like 2 nights. Crazy. Yeah. So that's the short. My main thing when I quit was, my worry was when I saw those chapters that were coming up, the really hard chapters, I was like, well, what if it gets worse? Like, what if there's even harder stuff coming up down the line? Because this is taking up all my time. It's ruining my weekends, my family life. I'm like, this is bad. What if he does something with kanji, 10 chapters from now? What are we going to do with that? So I was like, kind of like, yeah. So that was also one of my main reasons for quitting.
You tax English speakers' capacity with Chinese characters.
Yeah. But my main worry now is, like, because it's become so publicized, my main concern is that whoever comes in to replace me, I don't want them getting I don't want anybody saying, oh, this person isn't as good as the previous translator. That's my one regret about the whole thing. I don't want anybody evaluating them. And also, not enough credit has been going to the editor, who had to kind of shape these puzzles in some way, or at least put footnotes in to explain them in some way to make it somewhat readable. But I was surprised. I didn't think anybody was reading the series in the first place. Certainly no one was reading my Twitter feed. So there you go. That's my weird moment. And it's died down now. It's like it's gone down back to a normal. Well, I would say normal trickle, but it's still a trickle, so it's not normal. Normally, there would be like 0 response to anything I post on my Twitter. So there you go.
All right. So our main topic this time is Jason McNamara's upcoming graphic novel, Past Tense. And we're going to try to review it without spoiling it, because it's not even out yet. But before we do that, I did an interview with Jason about the book. So here's that interview. Okay, I'm talking with Jason McNamara, who you've often heard on Critiquing Comics. How you doing?
Greetings, Tim. How you doing?
Good. And, of course, this is not the first time Jason has been a guest on Deconstructing Comics talking about some of his comics work. And he's got something coming out called Past Tense, which is interesting because we just had a book called The Third Person. So we're having a lot of these grammatical terms as book titles. So tell us about Past Tense. What's the story about?
Past tense is about in the near future, there's a service that can put invisible camera drones back through time to see how history actually unfolded. So not time traveling to change time, but to view it, an unfiltered view of history as it actually happened. And of course, like any new technological advance, it gets used to creep on women and just view the most salacious events in history. And you may think that we live in a time of true crime, right? Like true crime is a big thing now, but there are crimes that we don't even know about. So Ashley is a camera operator at this company called Past Tense, and she sort of specializes in finding the most salacious, gratuitous things in history that we didn't even know what happened, and for an exorbitant fee, putting it on a screen for someone. And in doing so, she finds something in the past that will have ramifications for her present. And then it becomes a game of cat and mouse without giving too much away.
Yeah. So what inspired the story? How did you come up with the idea?
Well, anytime I listen to a true crime podcast, they always say, but we don't know for sure what happened. And I always want to be like, will we ever know? Will I know in the afterlife? Like, who was the Zodiac Killer? I want a definitive answer to this. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if you could just send a camera through time to see all the things uncover all the mysteries that we don't know. And also, I was thinking about the Apple AirTags. Like these AirTags came out, and they were like, "It's a great thing. You can find your missing luggage. You can find anything that's missing." And immediately, men were putting them in purses on the clothes of women that they wanted to stalk, so they could find them everywhere. And it just made me think: the more technologically advanced we get, like the less privacy you really have. And I kept thinking, like, in your private moments where you think you're alone, what if someone's watching you? What if you're never alone? So that was sort of the impetus of that. That was the two things. I want to know the answers of history, and also, like, how far are we going to push privacy and technology? Okay. And then, of course, I want to put that into a slasher movie.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about big things, but I want to do it in an entertaining way, as always.
Yeah, so I think you might have told me that this was horror, but it felt to me more like a thriller rather than horror, if you can see the distinction, because I mean, there are murders, but they could have been a lot more gratuitous than they are. In a few cases, we don't even see it happen.
Yeah, I didn't want to perpetuate the very thing that I was critiquing, right? I didn't want us to leer at these horrible things, and it's mostly women that are being the victims in this book. I don't want to sensationalize that and make that the thing that we're here for. So we made a conscious decision many times to pull back on the gratuities, on the gore, and more of the tension. Like, this is your life. People could be seeing you right now. I wanted you to feel tension with Ashley and what she's going through. Unless about, chopping people to bits, which we've all seen before. And if you can't find an interesting way to do it, then don't do it.
So how did you get hooked up with this artist, Alberto Massaggia?
I think that's right. Alberto and I had worked on another project before called The Cicada. And that project ran aground, and we may pick it up again. But when I hooked up with Dark Horse, we were looking at different artists. I remember that I had such a good time working with Alberto, and that he sort of has a bit of Eduardo Riso to him, the artist from 100 Bullets. And he was just someone that I really liked working with, and I knew if I brought him onto the project, it would be a peaceful collaboration. Alberto is very, very reliable, and he's really easy to work with, and he's just like a charming, lovely human being. And I wanted to have that experience on this book.
Is he Italian? Does he live in Italy?
He does live in Italy, yeah. When we FaceTime, it has to be either late at night or early in the morning.
I know how that goes.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
Is this your first book through Dark Horse?
It is, yeah. It's I normally self-publish, and I've been published through Image before, but this is the first time I've done a book through Dark Horse. And it is a luxurious experience having a hands-on publisher. I didn't know that I would like it as much as I do. For example, I lettered the book, and I did a lot of the interior work in the book. And it came time, I thought, okay, now I need to work on the title page, and I need to work on the indicia, and I need to find a barcode. And my editor was like, we have a design department that's going to do all that. And I was like, I did not. Thank you. I don't have to do the back cover. I don't have to go find a barcode. They have a proofreader. They're like a full operation that is hands-on with the books. So that was a relief just to be able to let people smarter than me do the design work. People with a better eye. Because I could chop my way through it, but it's always going to look better if a professional does it.
Yeah, so with Image, you have to do that yourself, right?
Yeah, I did it all myself.
Yeah, because they just kind of facilitate it, but they're not that kind of publishing company like Dark Horse or one of those. Yeah,
they're more hands off. You give them the book, Image will proofread it, and then they just put it out, which in some ways is great. You don't have anyone looking over your shoulder. You have complete control. As far as the content of Past Tense, we had a few notes from Brett, but for the most part, they liked the story and they were supportive of the story. And one of the few notes that I got was that Ashley, the main character in my original script, was a little too unlikable. I wrote her just a little bit too much like me. So, so when I was lettering the book, we softened a lot of her edges and made her less prickly. But for the most part, nothing changed from the outline to the script to what was produced. What did change was that Dark Horse was there through every step of the way to give me resources and to be there if I needed anything and to just package the book up. It was just a relief. It's going to be really hard going back to self-publishing.
Well, maybe they'll let you publish another book through Dark Horse.
We'll see. They plan far out. This book was approved in 2020.
Oh, wow.
So, and Alberto didn't start for another year. We didn't decide on an artist right away. So they plan way out. The book has been done since last fall. So they plan deep in the future. So even if they said, Jason, we love you, we want another book, you're not going to see it till 2025.
I see. So yeah, I thought, of course, this is a time travel story, and there are characters who we see at several different points in their lives, and I thought Alberto did a good job of drawing the same characters at different ages, and not every artist is good at that.
We did that before we started the book, and in the back of the book we have some character sheets of, we wanted to nail that. We didn't want to do that during the making of the book. We wanted to separately, what does this character look like young? Does it look old? And can you match that? Not everyone looks the same as an old person as a young person. Mm-hmm. So the main villain, we gave him a little scar above his eye that you see when he's young and then you see him when he's old again. And he's, in pretty similar shape as an old man. Mm-hmm. He kept up with himself. But that is also within his character. He's a very taut, methodical villain character who we see as a young man and a middle-aged man and finally as an old man at the end.
How did you settle on 2038 as the year it takes place? Dartboard?
Kind of, but I also wanted to, when we go into the past, I wanted to be able to talk about things that I lived through and I knew. So it could be really easy to say this is 2076 or 2049, but 2038 is not that far away, right? And I'll tell you exactly how I came up with it. Escape from New York came out 1982 and took place in 1997. It took place 15 years later. So I just added 15 to when the book was coming out.
I see. Okay.
That's really. But so when we go into the past, I'm describing homes and places that I lived in. I'm describing, in a lot of ways, I'm describing my own family when Ashley talks about her family. So those historical anchors would be the same.
I see.
I didn't want it to be flying car future. I didn't want it to be so far removed from where we are now.
Yeah, Star Wars or something. Yeah, it's not that different from our world. Just has technology's a little better, and
it's more populated too. In the background, it's almost like a deep plot of this book, but there is a population explosion going on in the background. To me, it's there, but it's just a detail in the world, but it's not called out specifically.
Okay.
In the dialogue, we do say, I think the population of the world has gotten up to 14 billion, and space is a huge resource. So Ashley, our main character, is sharing a like 6x5 room with someone else, and she feels lucky to have it. So space is a resource, a precious resource.
Okay, sounds like Tokyo. There's also this kind of subplot about these patches that people stick to their bodies, and it's like this addictive painkiller. And early on, Ashley is offered a patch, and she thinks she's going to flush it. And then later, she's got patches all over her, and that wasn't really explained. Is that just a reaction to all the stress that she's under with this guy?
I really approached Ashley and this whole. I wanted to make it feel like a regular retail job that many people have had. It's just almost like Starbucks. Like if anyone's ever had to work with the public, you'll understand Ashley and how she has like this inner monologue where she's talking to her clients. She's saying one thing, but inside she's thinking something else, like this motherfucker. So it's almost like a smoke break. In the future, cigarettes are probably outlawed or they're very expensive. So the idea of smoking is just putting a patch. And the character at one point says, "Oh, you're double dipping. You've got multiple patches. You must be doing pretty well, depending on how much you're smoking." So the patches could be different things. They could be cigarettes. They could be drugs. But yeah, she's smoking. When you see her with a bunch of patches on, she's smoking a pack of cigarettes.
At the same time.
Yeah, at the same time. Well, she's under a lot of stress.
Yeah.
there's a guy in the past trying to kill her.
Right. So it's mentioned early on, and it's important to the story, that anything from the past 50 years that you find out through the service is regarded legally as hearsay. So what would be the in-world justification for that?
I think it's an entertainment business, right? If you're paying all this money and you're going to go watch something on a screen that a camera's put in the past, you think about members of Congress. Think about what they did 50 years ago. They don't want to answer for that. Right? A lot of guys have gotten away with a lot of creepy shit. So if this is going to pass regulators, they have to know that there's not a consequence to them. Is really how I thought about it. And I also thought of it as it's an entertainment thing, almost like a palm reading. You wouldn't take a palm reader into a courtroom. So this is, there are people that think maybe this isn't the truth. And you could even get into religion. I sidestep religion completely. I do mention that they have a competitor called Faithful Perspectives, but I don't want to get into that because once you pull that string, that's an entirely different book.
Yeah, that's the sequel.
And I'm not the person to write that one. Someone else can write the religious one of this because, you could put a camera back and look at the crucifixion. You could see the Last Supper if they happened. What would that do to religion? Maybe they would say these things are not true. You can't trust this. It's the devil's work. It's, we live in a world of choose your own adventure reality already. So I think the powers that be, if they're going to let this go, if they're going to let this technology move forward, they don't want their own dark secrets coming back. And there's a 50-year ban, so I couldn't see what you did last night. So anything past 50 years is considered fair game, but you can't drag it into a court of law and get restitution for a crime that committed that long ago. It's a new and impractical science, Tim.
So she remembers that Silas called her Miss Mackenzie, but what was the significance of that?
She never told him her last name.
Ah, okay.
Why would he? Yeah, she has a name tag that says Ashley, but he knew her last name.
And that was because he'd been had an eye on her grandmother, her mother, and her mother. He's been watching her family for some time.
Yeah, his past overlaps with her past, but she doesn't know that. So, yeah, when he calls her Mrs. Mackenzie, that's a hint to the audience that he has some ulterior plan going on. He knows more about her than she knows.
Okay. So is this coming out in issues or going straight to a trade paperback? How is it coming out and when?
It comes out as a single graphic novel on June 21st in comic book stores everywhere. And it does break down, though. I know why you asked that, because inside the book, we break it down into 4 24-page chapters. And I just thought when you're dealing with a book that is like tense, you kind of need a break. So I wanted to have these chapter breaks to let the audience be able to put the book down or to maybe like catch their breath and just to like take the foot off the gas for a second. So we could have done it without that, and you could have read straight through as a single piece, which I love when the Walking Dead would do that in their trade paperbacks. They would actually take the covers out, and you would just read it as a continuous experience. But I wanted to slow it down a little bit and give the audience a breather, and it naturally breaks into 4 different pieces, so we might as well take advantage of that.
I see. Okay, so it's past tense. It's coming out in the future, June 21st. Okay, well, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you, Tim.
Coming up, Kumar and I review past tense, and we tell you what part of the show to skip to avoid spoilers. Also, Alex Squiers on his audio drama set in a world of superheroes and villains, the StarWell Foundation. First, just a reminder that you can help this podcast by making your Amazon purchases via deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon, and make that your bookmark for future purchases. Deconstructing Comics earns a bit of money from your purchase that helps us keep the show going. We really appreciate your support.
Justice League International, Bwahaha Podcast, a monthly show chronicling the adventures of the JLI era by Keith Giffen and J.M. DeMatteis. We started with the very first issue, and our coverage goes all the way through breakdowns. We're going issue by issue in release order, tackling 2 comics per episode, both a Justice League America issue and a Justice League Europe issue. Now, along the way, we're also taking time out for special episodes covering the quarterly book, interviews with various comic book creators, discussing the plethora of spin-off series, cartoon appearances, the infamous TV pilot, and more. And when we're all done, we'll wrap up our coverage by looking at the 2003 and 2005 stories formerly known as the Justice League, and I can't believe it's not the Justice League. So join me in an ever-changing roster of guest hosts as we celebrate your favorite JLI members, such as
Batman,
Martian Manhunter,
Captain Atom,
Fire, Ice,
Rocket Red,
The Flash,
The Elongated Man,
Maxwell Lord,
Elron,
Power Girl,
Renard Rousse, Crimson Fox,
Guy Gardner,
Metamorpho,
Booster Gold,
Blue Beetle,
Nort,
Justice League International Bwahaha Podcast, part of the Fire and Water Podcast Network. Want to make something of it?
Okay, Kumar and I are back, and we're going to talk about past tense. So
should we say that we actually are going to spoil it a bit in this half?
I think it's going to be a little hard not to.
Because normally we go pretty deep on these things, and we'd have to be pretty surface, because there's reveals. So it's about 120 pages, right? It's 4 chapters. So I don't know if it was meant to come out as 4 issues or what.
He said in the interview, he structured it that it's going to be a graphic novel and not issues, but he structured it that way just to kind of give the reader a break.
Okay. So there's some kind of like mega reveals at the end of issue 1, and then maybe around issue 2 or 3. So it's pretty early, and it's kind of, I don't know how to talk about it without spoiling those major events. But anyway.
The setup, obviously, is, I mean, we already talked about it with Jason. But yeah, this service that sends drones back in time, the actual science of that, of course, is never explored.
Well, it's beyond the...
That would be a whole book in itself.
Yes, because the drones can go back. So it seems like they send invisible drone cameras go back in time, so they can't see them in the past. And they can be sent, so you're watching a scene, you've got a 6-minute time limit. He might have explained all this in the interview. You got a 6-minute time limit, but you can follow whoever you want. So if you're looking at one person, you can ask the controller, okay, follow that other person now, and the camera goes around and follows the other person. But it's revealed early on, you have the option to pause the scene. Like if something's too full on, do you want to pause it? But I'm like, how can it pause it if it's actually watching the event unfold in real time? I'm not sure how that worked. And something else I don't, and this goes for all time travel stories, I don't like it when the time travel is casual. Because to me, this is the most monumental thing. And the discovery of time travel would overturn everything, right? In any capacity. And it seems like, okay, so first of all, it seems like it's run by it wasn't clear to me if it was run by one private corporation or if there were a bunch of them doing this service. But it's not government controlled, which struck me as shocking. I thought for sure the government.
There are regulations, but there
are regulations,
but it's a private company operating the service.
Yeah, and they also the thing that was so there were a couple of shocking things about this was it's a private company offering the service. But there's like cinemas with like marquees where you can see certain things that happened in the past, like footage that they've taken or whatever. But it's also not legal in court. It can't be used in court. I'm like, why? Why not?
Yeah,
it's considered hearsay. But I'm like, why is it considered hearsay? Is this isn't this actual footage of? Why can't this be used in cold cases? I realize there's a 50-year time. There's a 50-year. You're not allowed to go within the last 50 years due to privacy. So that's been regulated. But there are some cold cases, I'd assume, that go back more than 50 years. That I don't see why you couldn't use that in court.
Well, I mean, logically, I would think you could, but I asked Jason about that, and he said it was because the regulators, the government didn't, they wanted to cover up their own misdeeds in the past. So
that's a bit too. Is that too obvious? I don't know. Like, would it be clear that that's the reason why the government is not allowing it in court? I don't know.
You would think that there would be court challenges to that rule.
Yes. And at the very end, spoiler number 1, they do change the law so that it is allowed in court. But the main character, who is one of these people that controls the cameras, that manipulates the cameras and all this, what do they call them? They call them... there's a word for them. Anyway, attendants. The attendant. So this is her whole career. At the end, I don't know. How can I talk about this? I'm trying not to spoil it, but she's in a situation at the end of the story where she says they might have changed the law, she says, or something, but I have no idea about it. I'm like, how could you not know? If time travel was suddenly admissible in court, even if you were... if you go down to the shops to buy a Coca-Cola, you're going to hear about it. It's to some degree somewhere. This is not something that people wouldn't talk about. If you know what I mean? Like, It seems this kind of stuff seems monumental to me, and I don't see how you can be so oblivious that you wouldn't know that it was happening.
Yeah, well, and I mean, if this company has any power at all, they surely got lobbyists who would be keeping an eye on this kind of thing and fighting against it.
That too, yeah. So it was, I wasn't quite sure about the world that it was in. Like, it seems like it's new technology as well. It's relatively new, but very few people are like. There's no. I guess it's not the point of the book. The book is not about what the philosophy behind what it means to be able to look into a past and get an accurate picture of the past. Much like that issue of Fantastic Four where Reed Richards built that machine that could look into the past and was never mentioned again. I think it was 1966. And it's just like, okay, that's it. So we can look into the past and it's not like a big deal. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of, like, I did an episode of my show recently on Time Cop with Jean-Claude Van Damme. It's the same kind of thing. They're very casual about time travel. It's just like no big deal. Kind of, there's like there's time cops, of course, that stop other. That's a whole other thing. That movie makes no sense. But anyway,
well, yeah, I mean, I think the authors tend to set up the rules so that the story will be able to happen.
Exactly. Yes.
And yeah, that what I was thinking about the inadmissible in court for the first 50 years, because that makes a difference in the story. So you just have to come up with an in-world explanation for it, and.
Yes.
But yeah, it's really because the story would not work as well otherwise.
Yeah. 6 minutes was an interesting number, though. I wonder why
you can only view the past event for 6 minutes. I would have expected you'd get a little bit more for your money, but...
Well, I don't know about more, but my question is, why wasn't it 4 minutes or 9 minutes or 7 minutes and 35 seconds or some weird... No, I was just curious about it, that's all. But again, like you said, it's like you've got to, in this kind of thing, you've got to set up actually, the thing this book I think does well is it establishes those rules pretty clearly, like the 50-year rule and the 6-minute rule and things like that. I do wonder about what ordinary people think about the people who can't afford. Well, I think even people who can't really afford a lot of it do use it, but it's like looking at old Facebook photos or something for them. It's not like oh my God, I'm looking into the past. Yeah, but
yeah, I mean, anyway. It does make sense that people would be using it to look at the most salacious bits of past history.
Yes, and violent. Like because a lot of the marquees are like for serial killer stuff, and like it just seems very. I'm really curious about the world that this is set in, because people seem really like horrible in this that you would not want to know. Like they're all. It's not even the rich people are paying to watch murders. It's not just that, because it's all super like private. So nothing that you watch in the room leaves the room. But it's also these, I guess, like movie theaters that are showing, and you see all these headlines of things that you can watch.
The marquee, like what was it, Hitler's Gold Train, and Dinosaur Rampage,
Velisca axe murders. Like who we're paying to? These are literal snuff movies out in public that people are watching, and apparently it's fine, and it's advertised. Oh, a little thing about the world building is this is set, I think, in 2038. But another important plot point is that the nursing home, like the aged care system, is they freeze people they put people in like cryo-freeze capsules, and then they unfreeze them when you visit. And that seems like maybe 2138, not 2038. Like that seemed like, whoa, I can't imagine 15. I'm thinking about 15 years ago was, 2007. I don't think we're that far. That seems pretty advanced.
Yeah, let's see. I guess iPhone out yet in 2007?
I don't know, but still,
I think it was just about to come out. But
I think cryo-freezing is, unless Jason McNamara knows something I don't know about, like he's up on the tech, he's been reading about what the possibilities might be in the next 15 years. That seemed pretty full on. I'm not even sure was it necessary to the plot in some way. I think it shows like, I liked it as a plot point because it shows as like a vision of the future, because it shows how poorly we take care of our elderly and what the end result we might get to. It just, to me, seemed crazy that it would be 15 years from now instead of 115 years from now, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, there are a lot of kind of subtle bits of information in here where it's kind of mentioned in passing there are 14 billion people on the planet, and I hadn't even quite thought of it until I talked to Jason in terms of like how many there are now and how much more it's increased by this time.
Yes, but I also noticed that little tidbit too, and I thought that made me think that the future must be good, because they must have found a way to solve the food and hunger issue, and the space issue. They must have found ways to solve these things so that the planet could support 14 billion people 15 years from now. So maybe it's almost like must be a utopia for that to be the case. Unless it's 14 billion people living in complete misery. It's not really. Well, she lives in a kind of timeshare apartment. Yeah. So, like, she has it at nights, and her roommate has it during days.
Right, yeah, and Jason said that was part of the population thing, because it's grown so much that people have a hard time getting their own apartment. Or their
but how's that going to work in third world countries? I want to know more about what this universe is.
A lot of questions. I mean, in mature societies, birth rate tends to go down. Now, maybe if it's America, maybe there's been a lot of immigration. Maybe they finally fixed immigration. That would be pretty surprising. That is utopia. But here in Japan, the birth rate is falling. The population is shrinking, and I don't know. In some countries are losing population. I guess China has a graying society too. So yeah, I mean, I wonder, as maybe more countries more cultures, societies matured, that the population might, the global population might drop.
Yeah. But it was a weird little detail, like the nursing home capsules.
Mm-hmm.
That was, I don't know if it was distracting or made me want to know more. But we should talk about I guess we should lay out a bit of the plot. So we start with this Marilyn Monroe, John F. Kennedy sex scene.
Yeah.
And then we realize, and then we see it's being censored in story.
Mm-hmm.
And then we find out we're watching this camera. So somebody's paid to see this. 6 minutes of it.
Yeah.
Actually, okay, so it goes there. So JFK moves very quickly. Let's just say that. It's only 2 pages.
Yeah, because the scene starts out with them still clothed. So
yes, yes, and then they're doing. Then we get a full page. Yes, yeah. Okay, so there's this agency that does now again, we don't know if it's just one agency or multiple that. Oh no, because it's called past tense, so maybe it's only the one company has cracked this?
Yeah, we don't know about any competitors.
Right. Okay. Okay. So then we get our main character, whose name
Ashley.
Ashley. Right. She gets hired by this cop to look at a cold case. His name is Silas. He's an old dude. So this is more than 50 years ago. Meanwhile, she's looking at her own past. She's looking at her grandmother's past. Maybe that's a bit later on. But he wants to look at this old murderer, and he watches the murderer, and she's like, do you want me to follow the murderer after he's killed this woman? And he's like, no, stay on the woman.
Would be logical, yeah.
Yeah. He's like, no, stay on the woman. And then the 6 minutes is up. Now, this guy apparently doesn't have a lot of money. She's worried that he can't pay a lot. So again, this service seems like it's affordable. Like you don't have to be rich to use it.
I thought it was mentioned though how expensive it was.
It is
price given somewhere.
Yeah. But there's okay. So they're also trained to deal with trauma. The attendants, the people who manipulate the cameras. So people can deal with what they see in the past.
She has a sociology degree that was useless until this business became available.
Yes. Yeah, and her background is in trauma analysis. Okay. She does say something about how she's worried that she has a cop. They're always really depressing, and I think she said something about unsolved murder. Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, how could he despondent detective?
How could he afford it if he was on a cop's pension? I'm sure she was complaining about that he didn't pay. Well, maybe she's just complaining because they were depressed or whatever. Retired cop. Oh yeah, so she said. Yeah, he says. Her partner says, "What do you have next?" She says, "Retired cop, unsolved murder," and her partner says, "Oh, those are always so morose." And she says, "Worse than that, they're cheap as fuck." So apparently, they don't have a lot of money to pay for the service, or maybe they just can't pay for repeat business or what. I don't know. Yes, then we get to the crowded train or apartment, and she watches it. For some reason, her family is kind of falling apart, and for some reason, she's watching her videos of her grandmother and her dog.
And she's like tracking down traumatic moments in her family's history. She says she was trying to figure out the moment her family was broken, and there are too many choices of what moment it was.
If I felt my family was broken up, I'm not sure I'd go back to my grandmother losing her dog when she was 6 years old as like maybe the inciting incident. But anyway, so then she goes back to this cop again, and they watch this same killer. And she somehow, for some reason, accidentally, I don't remember why, she ends up following the killer this time. And then we get our first big reveal on page 27. Are we allowed to spoil this? We're going to bleep it, or what are we going to do? It's the first quarter.
Okay. Well, I'm going to, in editing, I'll put in a spoiler warning here and tell you what time point to skip to, because there's going to be another little talk on a different topic after this in this episode. Okay. So if you don't want it spoiled, you stop here and forward to the time I'm going to give you.
Okay.
Jump ahead to 5321 to hear our comments on the art and general feelings about the book.
But I think everything that follows is based on this reveal, right?
Right, yeah, definitely. The spoiler is that she discovers... I think what happens there is that she kind of goes rogue on him and skips to a part that he didn't ask for. Maybe she's thinking, I mean, if you're a cop, you want to know who did these murders, right? So she follows the killer, and it turns out it is that cop.
Yes. The cop who hired her to look, and he doesn't care about solving the crimes. He wants to relive them. He wants to, experience the murders again.
Yeah, he's addicted to that adrenaline rush that he got from the victim's reactions.
Yes. But she's not allowed to tell anyone about it because that's the rules of the system. And it can't be used against him because it's considered hearsay anyway. So he hires her to come back like 9 more times to take him through the system. Meanwhile, she's got her scheme, she comes up with a scheme to sell the videos. Right, or she'd sell the videos of the serial murderers to other people because she's uncovered a prolific serial murderer. Mm-hmm.
But she's telling each customer that they're the only ones who can see it. But she's going rogue on her company now and jacking up how much money she can make off of this.
Yes,
and thinking she's going to be able to just get out of there before it's discovered. But of course, she's wrong.
Yeah, and she wants to settle down with her grandmother, get her grandmother out of this capsule hotel thing, and live with her, have a nice life somewhere with their own house. It's her dream, and she thinks she can make enough money off of this system to do that by selling these under the table to do that.
So there was a point that I had to ask Jason about that I didn't get. Because there are a couple of points where we see someone watching Ashley on a screen. And I realized when that person is revealed at the end, I understood that, but I didn't link it up in my mind with those earlier scenes, that this was the person who was watching her in the future using the service.
Right.
There are a couple of scenes where someone is watching Ashley on a screen. Was that Silas? I wasn't quite clear on that.
We call that sometime, someplace. There is a third party watching her in the present, and at the very end, we follow up. It's like the second to last scene in the book. We close the loop on that.
Okay, that's that. Okay, I see.
Yeah. We chopped off a character's fingers, so when you see a character missing 3 fingers watching her on screen, and then that character in the present loses 3 fingers, it catches you up to where that person is. So it's someone that she knows in the present watching her in the future.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't notice his hands. He was kind of almost in silhouette.
Well, we didn't want to give it away. It wasn't Silas. It's her coworker.
Okay. I got it. All right. So, yeah, that I kind of tripped over that.
Well, that's actually a clever time travel thing, actually.
Yeah, it's clever. I didn't quite get it. But yeah, then that reveal is the next to last scene, and what confused me there was that then we jump back to 2038, and
you're looking at an old woman, and you're assuming it's her 50 years later, but it's actually her grandmother.
Yeah, I thought, okay, now we're 50 years later, and so what's this last scene? Oh, wait, we've gone back in time again.
Well, that's the thing, is it's clever with the caption, because sometimes it just says sometime, someplace. So you don't know when those scenes are happening. It's a little bit sneaky, but it's clever, actually. I liked it. It did add up at the end, but yeah, I did a kind of double take. And I still, even looking at that now, I was like, oh, is that the cop keeping surveillance on her?
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I see why he wanted this scene to be last, because it's got a line that kind of wraps up the whole thing.
Right.
But, I don't know, I still thought it might have been better to end with the reveal in the future.
Right. Oh, yeah, maybe so. Yeah.
Just because it was kind of easier to follow the logic of it.
Yes, but maybe not. It's not as thematically important, I guess, that little bit. But yeah, so he finds out that she is selling the material. Also, somebody recognizes him. One of the people that she's selling these serial killer videos to recognizes him, even though it's 50 years later or whatever, recognize him as the guy from the videos. He follows him. It turns into a huge kind of cat and mouse game where he's hunting her down. She ends up on the run.
And he like gets her fired and kind of gets her roommate killed and gets her evicted from her apartment.
Yes, all that kind of stuff. But didn't she reported herself.
Right.
And you know what? Oh yeah, there's a real cheat line here. So she actually, this is kind of maybe the point that stuck with me more than the video, who was watching the video. So she gets called out of she's in the office with Silas, the cop / serial killer, and her boss comes in and drags her out of there in the middle of it and says, we need to have a review, and reveals that she knows that she's been profiting from her discoveries on the side. All this stuff sounds very much like 2023 non-disclosure agreements that these companies, all the big tech companies have, right? It sounds, it's very much of the moment, it felt like. And also kind of the gig work aspect of it was kind of struck me like that too. But there's a caption, she says, so her boss says, don't bother denying it. Once I was alerted to your actions, we audited your logs. And there's a caption in the same panel where a thought narration caption, which says, and who alerted her, I wonder. But she herself reveals a few pages later that she alerted her herself. Why is she
ratted herself out? Yeah.
She ratted herself out. So why is she saying, and who alerted her, I wonder? Is it supposed to be read sarcastically, I guess? Or it sounds like almost she knows that it was, because she ends up blaming her coworker that has a crush on her for it. She says, I heard what happened. And he says, I heard what happened. And she says, I bet you fucking did. Thanks to your big mouth, I lost my job. So she blames him she ratted herself out, and then she blames him for it. And then in her thought balloon is, and who alerted my boss, I wonder. But it's so strange because why is she wondering? It's like in her, even if it's sarcastically, even if she knows it's the coworker that's got the crush on her, why would she think it sarcastically herself? It's so strange.
I guess I missed that.
It's a real misdirect. Because it stuck in my mind. Because then she blamed him, and then she revealed she did herself. I was like, what? So, but again, it's hard to keep all these chess pieces. There's a lot of moving parts here, especially with the time travel stuff, and it's a serial killer story. There's a lot going on, and to add all those layers to it, it's hard to...
As I mentioned to Jason, I got confused the first time through because there are like 3 different men that she interacts with a lot, and I was kind of mushing them together. I was a little confused about who was who, and then the second time through, I started to kind of separate them into 3 different people. Like, oh, I see, okay.
Yes. Yeah, it might help on a second read.
Yeah, a lot of names to remember.
Yeah, I will say that the art by Alberto Massaggia is actually pretty solid. Like I did think the faces, to me, I didn't really have trouble telling people apart. I thought the faces were pretty clear. And he has to draw this character 50 years apart.
Yeah, that was something I noticed too.
A difficult thing to do.
The same person at different ages.
Yeah, and he's being asked to draw very, very difficult future cityscapes and stuff, and future trains and all this kind of stuff that's not easy to draw. I mean, it's supposedly only 15 years in the future, but there's a lot of, and he has to all sorts of different time periods. There's like the 60s, there's the 80s, there's the 2023s. I mean, this is a huge amount of research material. You got to draw cars from different eras. This is not an easy thing to draw, and he's actually done a pretty bang-up job of it.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, well, I think we've talked about this long enough, but
yes, and we didn't spoil. There was a major spoiler which we didn't spoil, and I guess we didn't have to. I was worried that we were going to have to reveal. There's a super major plot twist in there, which somehow we managed to not talk about.
Yeah,
so that's good.
Yeah, good for us. So, so in general, what did you think of the book?
I like a time travel story, but it's got to be pretty tight. I was a little bit lukewarm on it because I wanted to know more about the world and the general people's reactions to these kind of things, and I wanted to know why the government was involved. All that kind of outside. I was kind of obsessive about the time travel stuff. I think the cat and mouse stuff is really good. Like where he makes her lose her accounts get frozen and she loses her apartment, all that kind of stuff, and how she gets back at him. I thought all that stuff was really good. And thematically, I really liked the way it closed out. I thought it was touching final couple of pages there as well. But I did feel it was lacking in the world building, which depending on what you look for in a book like this, that might be the most important thing for some readers. Or might not.
It's the most complicated thing to work out, too, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, Jason has done other kind of like crime or thriller or horror stories before, but I don't know that he's done anything this sci-fi before.
Right.
Wasn't that book about Mars? Was that him?
The Martian Confederacy. That's been quite a while ago, but yeah, that was a little. I mean, it's a different tone. I mean, I guess there certainly was sci-fi to it, but boy, that takes me back to rather early days of the podcast.
Probably 15 years back, I'm guessing.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. But yeah, I did enjoy this book. It was exciting. Yeah, there's a lot to keep track of, and multiple readings help you kind of grasp it.
Yeah.
But yeah, looking forward to it coming out in, what did he say, June.
Okay.
Now I'm talking with Alex Squiers in Connecticut. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you for having me on.
Great. So tell us who you are and what you do.
I'm Alex Squiers. I was the co-host of a podcast called Opinions May Vary. We ran for 10 years and 450 episodes, many of which we talked to artists and creators and other makers, and generally people we called people more interesting than us. And, that was a good time. My co-host, JR, retired and left me with running the the podcast, and I decided to take it a new direction. So I am starting an audio drama called the StarWell Foundation, and that is being kickstarted right now. That ends on March 9th, but we've reached our initial funding. The StarWell Foundation is about a comic book world where there are superheroes and supervillains, and there is a charitable company which does the thing where they bring celebrities and athletes to meet children in hospitals, but some of the kids start asking to meet supervillains instead of the usual people.
Well, if that sums it up.
There's one more thing, sir. We have a child at St. Leo who has made 17 requests for the same person.
If it's a superhero that isn't accessible, can we find a replacement?
It's not a hero. They're asking for a villain.
Anyone have an in with the villains? Okay. Who wants to screen the actor pool and check in with the costumes department and get this kid a villain?
And our main character, Mary Dare, is the one tasked with finding these villains and getting them to agree to come visit children and maybe come do things that aren't quite as evil. And season 1 will follow her along as she tries to get villains to trust her, tries to get heroes to trust her, and keep her coworkers trusting her as well.
I was surprised at how many actors are involved in this project.
Yep.
So how did you find all these actors? How did you recruit them to be in your drama?
I have a lot of friends. I'm lucky. I've worked at a local theme park for about 20 years during their Halloween haunted house season, and I've done makeup for them, so I know their entertainment department, and I meet a lot of actors that way, and through them I meet more actors. So I do some makeup effects for other productions, so I meet some like some low budget movie people around and people who want to move on to do bigger things, and we just become a community. And it's a matter of remembering who you know and who you talk to, because I've met people at my other jobs where I just push boxes and they say they have some acting theater background, and so I keep them in the back of my head, and when the time comes I ask for some favors and who can spare their time, and thankfully a lot of them agreed to it. when I was writing the parts, like for The Office, for the people of StarWell, I could have written just two people, like two characters in that spot, but I chose to give myself a hard time and make it 5.
I see.
It's 11:11. Time for our daily meeting. Hope you all had time to recover. If you need her, therapist Nia is available. But today's a new day. Who's first? Rebecca, what do you have?
I got word Cliff Carnes' film shoot is delayed 2 weeks due to a flooding incident at his proposed location, so he should be able to make the visit to Grace General and Brava Hospital within the next 2 days.
Nice work, Becca. Travis? Saw the point card for the Quixotes was partying after his game on Friday. Did he make it to his grant?
He sure did, boss, right on time. It was his idea to bus the kids to an indoor court and shoot some hoops. The guy is a machine.
So why did you decide that your audio drama would be a story based on superhero comics?
Because it's what I know. I'm a big fan of comic books, and I know what kind of stories I would want to tell. If I could afford to hire an artist and an inker and a colorist, or if I was any good at art myself, I would try and make a comic book. But since I have this background in podcasting and I have a semi all right ability to make cuts and edits and put things back together, and I found I was able to tell the story in this way. And so that's what I'm going to stick with, because it's what I know it can do.
I see. So do you have any plans to make like a comics version of the story that you're doing as an audio drama now?
That would be great. Like, I'm not banking on it at this very moment, but it would be swell if that comes along. And I have a few ideas of what I could do, or however the possibility comes along, whoever would allow me to do it, if I have an editor or someone tell me what I should make, or if the power is all mine. But I don't think I would follow the story I'm telling with the audio drama series. I would pick a different part of the world and follow that in a comic book form.
So how are you intending to make this available once it's completed?
Well, we have omvpodcast.com. That's where all of our past episodes are. And that's where the pilot season is of the first 2 episodes I made in 2020. So they'll just be uploaded right onto that same format as our past episodes. They'll be available to everyone. It's through Libsyn, and Libsyn branches it out to all podcast players and Apple podcasts, and it goes on Spotify all through that site. So yeah, it's for the public. That's one of the tough things trying to get it kickstarted, is that it's not going to be exclusive to backers. I will have things that are exclusive to backers, but this will eventually be for everyone.
I see. Yes. Mm-hmm. So why did you decide to do it that way? Just out of curiosity.
Well, I mean, it's the best way to get more listeners, to be honest. If I make something exclusive, then I'm not going to be able to branch out and have more people listen to what I've made and be entertained, and hopefully tell me they want to hear more. At some point there's a comic book on the shelf that everyone can check out before they buy it. I'm just giving them the whole, like a library. Here's the whole thing. And eventually with future Kickstarters, hopefully, if I'm lucky, they can get their individual, like, customized content or stuff that only backers will get. But yeah, it's just the best way to meet the public and offer everyone something.
I see. Okay. So what kind of stuff is available to supporters that's not available to the public?
So everything will come attached to the ID badge that is at the $15 level, because that'll have its own QR code. I believe I'm going to do it through a Google Drive. And once the QR code brings them there, after episode 1, they'll get episodes a week early, but there'll also be a additional podcast. It'll be like a true crime podcast, but from within the universe. So instead of talking about real world crimes, they'll be these people hosting the podcast will be talking about crimes that people within the universe have committed and how they've been brought to justice or how they got caught. It'll be the rise and fall of the Baffler, who's one of our questionnaire villains who gets viciously assaulted later on in his career, or how one character may have gotten away and escaped custody. And so there'll be ways to look at the history of the city that way. And it'll give some background on some of the heroes and the villains that won't be exposed through the conversations and the normal storyline that we go through with StarWell itself. So that's one thing. After this stretch goal, if we make a second one, I'll have a map made of the city, so people who back will get a full view of the map. That I won't release to public unless but in much smaller snippets, so no one will get the entire thing unless they back. Stuff like that. If people are interested in behind the scenes recordings, or everyone loves seeing people messing up lines, I'll have a couple of those in there too.
If there's support for it and people are listening and so forth, how long do you think this series of audio dramas could go?
The story I have planned for Mary, the main character, can go 5 seasons. So if I stick to a 6-episode format, I'm very sure I could get 5. If I'm lucky enough to get to a second season, that'll be exploring more, finding villains, and showing them that they could do more with what they have and what they've done so far, and not just do things like come visit kids, but you might be a mad scientist, but you're still a scientist. So maybe you can cure some people with what you've learned and been able to do. So you could do more with what you've been given than just rob banks and throw cars into space and get in fistfights. So that would hopefully be the inspiring season. And then we'd follow it up with some tragedy in a following season.
Oh my. Okay. That sounds bad.
It's going to get very bad.
By the way, I loved the insurance commercial with the superhero universe insurance terms like heroic intent.
Are you worried about what could happen to your home, car, or even yourself if a superpowered battle causes damage to your property? Does your insurance cover acts of powers, super crimes, or heroic intent? Ask your agent, and when they say no, come ask us. We've got you super covered.
Yeah, it's so those I put in on purpose. I wasn't sure if I was fully planning it at that stage, but that's one of the backing points in the Kickstarter is you can buy an interlude. So I stick to the 3-act format for each episode where we do character stuff, we meet people, we have an adventure, and then there's something in between each act, like a news report. So it might not involve the characters you've just been dealing with, and it'll be, well, here's what happened at this one scene. Here's a commercial. Here's an interview. Here's something else brief to still show you the world, but it's not part of the immediate story. But there's a chance we'll be meeting these characters later on. And one of the things with Dependico, which here's a secret between us, that's a subsidiary of Siege Reliant, which there's this guy named Siege who is kind of like a kingpin who oversees the city and has his fingers in all the stuff. And what he does with his company is he tries to drill in the fact that you need him and you need to rely on him. So hence he forces terms like resilient, reliant, and depending on him. And that's one of his companies.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So where can people get more information about this?
Our main website is omvpodcast.com. That's where all of our past episodes are. That's where new information as it gets released, as I go through it, will be posted. That's where new episodes are going to be. I post to our Instagram a lot. That is Opinions May Vary, all one word. And the ongoing Kickstarter is, if you just go to Kickstarter and search StarWell, one word, it should pop right up. But there's also links everywhere else you can find it on the Instagram and the omvpodcast.com website.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, we'll keep an eye on this. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Follow the link in the show notes to listen to the first 2 episodes of the StarWell Foundation. If you've enjoyed this week's show or any other Deconstructing Comics episodes, tell your friends. Share your favorite episodes on your social media. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube by clicking our social media buttons at deconstructingcomics.com. Our theme is by J.B. Anderton. If you're looking for some constructive feedback on your comic, send it to us and we'll critique it on our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Send it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We'll read it and record our critique. Next week on Critiquing Comics, we look at the latest issues of 2 series we've previously discussed. Jason and I look at the 2nd issue of Brandon Hayes' stories of his bipolar character Thready in Tuesday. Then Adam joins me to talk about the 4th installment of Emmanuel Filteau's dystopian future story, Tales from the Interface. That's all next week. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.